Most of you, honestly speaking, suck at studying. If you're the person who just opens up the page 1 of the chapter and just starts reading through, then this video is for you because you're hugely messing up. My name is Zain Asif and I'm a third year medical student who has been consistently working on and getting good at how to learn and absorb information efficiently, effectively, for over 5 years now. And today I'm going to show you what no one does. I'm going to show you exactly how I study one of the topics that I'm not very good at, and I'm going to show you how I do it live. Like actually step by step. Every single part of the process, I'm going to try and transparently show you as much as I possibly can. I've made live demonstrations before, but I'm going to make this as interactive and transparent and literally speak the words as I'm thinking them as much as I possibly can and show you as if you're like standing right behind me. So let's get into another video on my live studying series. The disclaimer for this video is that even though I'm going to try and explain what I'm doing, I'm not going to tell you why I'm doing every single thing. Like, I've done plenty of videos explaining why the specific method is like more effective, why it's better than just reading or just doing a million questions. So yeah, I'm going to try and keep it as natural as possible, try and focus a bit as well, even though I don't know how it's going to go if I'm going to be doing this like talking to you thing while I'm studying. But let's get into it. I'm excited. Now, instead of studying one by one topic, I am studying 3 diseases today, 3 endocrine diseases that all link together: Addison's, Cushing's, and Cons. It's going to be a lot to go through content-wise, but they're all very much related. So I think this will be a good example of how to get through like a lot of information, how to condense it quickly and learn it like efficiently. I'm going to start step 1 in a minute. What I always do is I start by skimming through all the content for all of the diseases so that I can understand them in the most basic sense. How they work, what are their main causes? What are they? Because once I can do that for all of the diseases, then I can do a very important thing. I can differentiate and relate them. And that is something that is very important as soon as you start studying. You have to be thinking, how can I relate these concepts, differentiate between them? Because when you differentiate between them, you'll be able to link them together and then remember them for much, much longer. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, because it is 3 big conditions that I'm looking at, I am only focusing on the resources such as this high yield textbook that I have from Past Medicine and, for example, like these YouTube videos that I'm looking at. I'm not looking at any thick textbook. I'm not doing a billion Google searches. I'm relying on the stuff that will give me the basics in the most effective, efficient way possible. And then, of course, I will study the harder details once I've laid the basics of the knowledge down. And while I skim, by the way, I'm writing down all the key phrases and the key concepts that I think are important in creating that basic understanding. So on here, for each disease, I'll put down the main concepts, the causes, the investigations, the treatments, and then what I'll do is I'll use these keywords, categorize them, put them under neat subheadings and sub-subheadings, and then eventually all of this will kind of go on a mind map, and it will be a lot more intuitive than what I've just explained, but let's continue the process. Now, the tip number 1 that I want to give you is that when you are doing this initial skimming, when you are studying all of these diseases at the same time, or all of your concepts at the same time, you need to be thinking about the central idea of your mind map. Now, for me, after a little watching and looking at the causes and reading a bit about the basics about each of the diseases, what I've kind of figured out, as you've seen, is that they all involve the adrenal gland, which is kind of why I chose to study them all together in the first place. And they all involve the hypothalamic to pituitary axis. All 3 of these conditions either involve cortisol or aldosterone or both. So in my head, I'm thinking that link between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal gland can be like the center of my mind map. We can have the brain with the pituitary gland inside, and then below that we can have the kidney with the adrenal gland on top of it. And then the rest of the mind map can like visually show what happens in each disease. So like kind of this is what I mean, where this is the pituitary axis, is that and that those are the kidneys with the adrenal glands on top of them. And like, for instance, each of these diseases involve that. Maybe one side of my mind map can be like the Addison side, which is a reduction of both hormones, and this side can be the Cons and the Cushing side, which is like an increase in both of those hormones. And I think that is like a good way to organize the mind map. But again, I'm going to keep on going with this list. There's a lot more that I need to look at. I'll look at it for another like 15-20 minutes and then I'll start with the mind map. But yeah, I was just thinking, let me just communicate what I was thinking about the mind map as I was doing it. Like, this is kind of what I mean. I've just looked at this video and it's kind of showing us exactly what we were thinking about including on our mind map with the pituitary gland and the brain linking, and we can kind of draw these links out and how the stuff released by the pituitary then hits the adrenal gland and causes cortisol, the stress hormone, and aldosterone to be produced, or in this case, in Cons and Cushing's case, it causes some sort of, there's a deficiency of that. And I think this will really help us differentiate between the causes. That's what I kind of want you guys to remember, that I'm writing these keywords, skimming through the content very slowly with the goal of understanding what the similarities and the differences are between each of my main concepts. In our case, these concepts are the diseases, but this applies to practically every single topic that is out there. Every topic is divided up into concepts, and the way you remember the concepts is by differentiating between them and finding their differences and similarities, and then adding them to a structure in your head. So for us, as you saw from the beginning, this is what I've been doing. I literally divided up all three of my conditions into, and I would find a way to split them. These two are increases in the adrenal gland hormone production. This one is a decrease. So in my head, the mind map's already split. This side of my mind map will be the side that will have the high production and low production on this side. And there's this thing in the center. Of course, I may revise this as I go through and I'll let you guys know, but I don't even know how long I've been revising for. And like this, I've now figured out the main way that my head is probably forever going to be differentiating between these conditions. Anyways, I'm going to continue and I'll let you know if I think of anything else. I also want you guys to notice that how I'm studying the conditions as well. As you've seen, I've never actually gone really like deep into one for more than a few minutes. My approach throughout the entire thing is I need to understand every single difference between each of them. So I need to understand the differences between their causes, then I need to understand the differences between their investigations, and then I need to understand I'm going to do that, understand the differences between their treatments. I'm in between the process of doing this, but I wanted to explain that to you as well. Because only once I understand the differences will I be able to, again, I'm saying this again and again, but then only will I be able to create this structure that will be able to go on my mind map. And the way that you remember things is by how they're similar or different to other things, kind of like that's how they link in your head. I'm also being very selective of what goes on my keyword list, like to do with the specific basic knowledge that I want to get. Even in these like high yield textbooks, they want to give us all the details, right? So they're literally saying so much stuff that I know I can't spend like an extra 10 minutes and understand, but I don't want to do that because that is the detail layer that will just waste more of my time. If I can narrow down and get the basics on point, if I can get the second layer on point, then the details will literally just like, I'll be able to understand them very quickly and easily. Also, one other thing, while I'm making this list, as you can see, it's not just like a list of words because that's a waste of time. Yes, you can start by doing that and then you can categorize them, but what I'm doing is I'm categorizing as I go because that helps me understand what like the link is between different things. For example, here I have the two main causes of Cushing's, which is like exogenous and endogenous, and then I've broken the endogenous stuff out into three. At the same time, I did that with cons as well. I broke it down into primary, and I'm going to do the secondary in a bit, but the primary is the main stuff. So I've broken down the primary as well, and that's allowed me to understand what the differences are between treatment as well. I'm not sure how I'm going to divide this on the mind map, but it's helping anyways. Overall, my point is that categorize as you go. That's like the best way to do it. It's the fastest way to do it, and that allows you to really understand the differences between the conditions and create a better mental model in your head as you go through it. To be honest, I think this is where I'm going to stop with the keywords, because by doing all of these like three topics together, I've probably bit on more than I could chew. And when that happens, when you have too many keywords on there, that can tend to confuse you. So that is why I think stopping here and starting with the mind map right now would be the best action to take. It's always really important at this stage, at this basic stage, to think about, okay, what is important? What is going to really help with my initial understanding? And then I'll move forward. Because with the amount that is on here, not every single thing is very, very important for my basic understanding. So I'm going to put the basic stuff on there first, then I'll start making my questions and my entire process anyways. A good rule of thumb is that if your like keyword list has more than 10 to 20 things on it, then probably like stop, reassess, see what you have to cut out, and like just start with actually the basics of the topic. For me, I now know what actually needs to go on my mind map. From this initial skimming and learning about the topics, I've kind of understand them in a very good sense now that I can easily build on my mind map. I know I'll probably have main investigations for the Cushings as like the differentiating for each of the types. That makes the most sense to me right now. For Addison's, they'll probably be similar to my usual stuff. I'll like draw someone out to show their like features. Something is in my head, but I now just have to put it on a piece of paper. And as you can see what I just did there, throughout my entire studying that you just watched me do in like probably a fast forward way, is that I'm thinking throughout, how is this thing gonna appear on my mind map? How am I gonna split it up? How is it gonna look like in my head when I'm answering questions in the future? What is the central idea that links all three things? And I think I actually probably will start with my original thought of linking like the diseases through this like axis and see how I can like split them up. But I guess, yeah, let's start drawing and I'll talk through more of it. Oh, and if it wasn't clear, if I didn't mention this, I'm going to be using this keyword list and like the categories that I've created already and then putting that on my mind map. That is the main step that I'm doing right now. I'm now trying to think about, now that I've drawn like the middle of the mind map out, as I kind of showed you guys before, I'm now trying to think, how am I going to divide the different types of Cushings up and how am I going to show it visually? And then I'm also thinking about how I'm going to do that with each of the other categories. I know I verbally said it like a minute ago to you guys, but it's like, I would really suggest taking at least a few minutes to think about how you're going to organize things on your mind map. Because that is essentially how you'll start to think about it when you study it later on, when you start to actually do questions on it. When you think about it as a doctorate, I'm assuming that is how I'll remember it. I think I've done a pretty good job to draw like the types of the Cushings. Like what I would have usually done is literally like draw arrows out from the middle of the mind map and like written out the types and categorize them. But I feel like doing it through one of the investigations that you do for Cushing makes it a lot more easier for me to remember them. So like I will now easily remember what this type of Cushing does, what this type of Cushing does, and what this type does through the investigation. Like I think that's just a smart way to think about it. And I think it's relatively like simple as well. I've added the colors in to make, because that helps with the memory of it, and I've still like drawn out like the it's not the best drawing, but it's still a drawing of like the Cushing's patient and what the features I'd expect with them. These sorts of drawings usually stick in my head from what I've previously done, and it's like the basic way of explaining it. I think it works. I'm gonna do the same thing with cons and Addison's now. Again, it would be a lot cooler if I had like an iPad and I could easily draw it out and I had to like think less and I could do a lot more trial and error. There's pros and cons. With paper, like it helps me. I think I have to think about it a lot more because it's going on paper and I don't want to like keep redoing the mind map, right? Like there's pros and cons either way. Now I've drawn like a lot of it out and it's very like nice and simple and it makes a lot of sense, but I don't know if it's 100% in my head because I've also been like thinking about what I'm gonna say to you guys, and like it's a very meta process. This does happen quite a lot, like when you are like so in the drawing, when you've like done all this stuff, like you kind of like you're not 100% sure if it's in your head and if you actually fully understand it. So I think the best thing to do, even like halfway through the mind map or like halfway through the skimming, is like stop and like just close your eyes and just recall what you've drawn out and what it looks like in your head. Try and picture it as much as possible. So that's what I'm going to do now. The reason I did that is that sometimes that this mind map process becomes a little passive, and I think you just need to like rejig what's in your brain and really make sure that you remember everything. And as I said, I kind of have finished like the con section of it as well. And again, I just wrote a few like key things, the key differences between them, the similarities between them, and I'm going to do the similar stuff with the Addisons and finish this off quickly. And I think for now, this is a good enough basic mind map of all three conditions, summarizing pretty much everything important that I need to know. Non-details. I don't think the details, all the details are on here, like the different types of surgeries, the different types of meds required, their like specific doses. That will come either now or in my future study sessions. However, throughout this whole thing, the way I've thought about it is that I'm kind of piecing a puzzle together. And I didn't really used to do this when I initially started making the mind map, but what I did just now is that I was learning while I was creating the mind map. Yes, I was trying to create a basic structure, but I was reading also while I was trying to create it. I was making sure my skimming was correct, making sure the keywords and stuff are written down is correct, making sure I can make it make sense in my head. For example, here, I probably took way more time with my mind map than I probably would have usually. But it's because in between, I'm going back to my notes, I'm checking from my textbooks, I'm really taking time and thinking about what I've learned, trying to recall it as much as possible as well. And then either adding more on this mind map, which I've not made this like too complex. It's very simple compared to some of the previous mind maps I was even making a month ago. Like, I've brought these other mind maps out, like previous ones that I've drawn even in the last like month. And what I've realized is that I struggle with remembering the more detailed ones. And there's a reason. It's because there's too much writing on all of these. If I simplify it in my head as much as possible, I can 100% guarantee that I'll remember this even a year from now, even if I don't study this. Because I've laid out the structure in such a simple way for all of the diseases that I'm representing on here. If I just added a ton of words, lacked the diagrams, if I didn't add the colors, it would be much harder. I've made a whole video on how to make good mind maps. I'll link it up here. So now the way I study is I take a lot of time to think about how I'm going to lay out the entire topic on like in the simplest way possible, in the simplest way for me to remember, and in a way that I can easily compare between the conditions that I'm putting on there or between the concepts that I'm putting on there. That takes time. Initially, you will just want to put a ton of information on there, but it's not necessary because a few of these icons represent the information, the full words, the full sentences that I require and that I need to know. So yeah, the skimming, the mind mapping, all of this initial process may have taken me a bit longer, but it's because I'm going through not just the basic layer like I've been recommending to you in the past, but I'm also trying to learn the second layer while I do this, because it's just much easier to remember information when you're actively trying to link it on a mind map. It's just faster to take in more layers of information while you're trying to link it all onto a mind map. And as you saw, this didn't mean that I skipped like the layering process. I was still doing the basic information. I did that on the mind map, and then the keywords. Then I laid up the more general concepts, and then I put it all onto the mind map. And even while I was doing that, I was learning, so it was very much still in layers. My head is not ready for the complex stuff right now, like drugs and the specific surgeries or the specifics of the topics that I need to know, like the pathophysiology of it, etc. Actually, maybe it is. Maybe that's what I'll probably look at now, because to be honest, naturally that is where my brain is going, and that is what the rest of the learning is going to be. It's going to be going and understanding and learning the things that I naturally want to fill my gaps with. Like the rest of my learning, yes, I'll be creating questions alongside, but the rest of my learning is literally just filling in the gaps from this mind map, from my knowledge for each of these conditions, continuously thinking about my mental model of all three diseases. I'll skim through more like detailed resources to see if there's not something that I've studied yet. Are there any specific exam questions that I need to look at? Is there like a specific knowledge gap that I have? So yeah, let's do a bit more of that, and I'll speak to you guys in a second. And by the way, side by side, while I'm learning more about each of the conditions, I'm also creating recall questions from the basics that I already understand. And I'm also now adding on them with the details that I'm learning. Because I feel like with these questions, the main important purpose they have is to assess the details and the specifics of the knowledge that I don't know. Because that's that's the main stuff that our exams actually assess. So overall, with these questions, I have kind of changed the way I do this, and I think I've improved it in the right direction. I don't just randomly start creating recall questions anymore. Because for me, honestly, I've done it for years. So I know in the beginning, my recall questions are always just really basic. So when I go and attempt them in my second session, they're kind of just too basic. Which means in that session, then I have to answer these basic questions first, which is too easy in that session. And then I have to go and edit them and improve them and find more details and make them like harder, align those questions with my exam, and it's a lot more time consuming. So now what I do is I wait for like 30-45 minutes after my basics are like rock solid, after I have a good baseline understanding of whatever I'm studying, and then I go to create these questions, which means that the difficulty of the questions is the right difficulty for my current level, so that next time when I go and study these questions in my next study session, I'll actually be challenged. I'll actually have to think and remember what are the important parts. Like I'll have to think and remember the important parts rather rather than answer what does this definition mean and this other basic question mean. I think these are pretty good for now. I think in a session like this, what I would do is literally just continue with how I'm studying, going through each disease another time, taking in more of the information now that I have the basic layer, now spending time on some of the details, creating questions out of those details, doing it layer by layer for each disease, trying to think about how it all links still to my mind map, how it still fits in with my mental model. Anyways, I'm going to put up a summary slide of all the steps and the tips that I've talked about in this video that I've used during my studying, trying to make it a bit more structured. Even though this video wasn't as structured as I would like, I think it was more natural. It was more just me blurting out exactly what I'm thinking when I'm studying, what mistakes I'm making, what my process is. Like, you guys had like an in-depth picture into it. If this type of video was beneficial, then please comment down below and I'll make the second part where I'll actually film myself in my second session studying these topics, answering these questions. Like, you'll actually see me tackle my weaknesses, learn the more detailed stuff, and I could go into more layers in my second session. Let me know if that's something that you guys would like. But what I want most from you guys is I want feedback on this video. What edit did you not like? What specific part of the video was really helpful to you? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? And yeah, of course, I'll link some more in-depth videos that I've made to do with how I make the mind maps, how I layer, more in-depth, more structured videos rather than just like blurting and like a natural thought process of me while I studying, which this was, and I think it would be helpful, but let me know. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe down below if you've enjoyed it, like the video, spam the comments, do the usual stuff, follow my Insta, email me if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.